This is a presentation I made at a international conference on science of consciousness held in Arizona about 2 weeks ago. This presentation was made there on the 4th April 2018, and because of time constraint, I used a written script, so it is easy for me to reconstruct it and create this recording. So let me begin it using my slides. Conveying the Vedic narrative of non-physical consciousness to scientists. Why this presentation? I am not aware of a single source of a correct and accurate representation of the Vedic narrative of consciousness mind combined, consistent with the Vedas, Upanishads, and the treatises of Samkhya by Kapil and Yoga by Patanjali. This presentation is an attempt in that direction. Consciousness will be mostly referred to as Purusha in this presentation and body. Yajurveda 40.15 says, Vayu anilam amritam athedam bhasmantam shayiram. Consciousness is an attribute of Purusha that is, number one, invisible but so powerful that its separation from body means death. Number two, not made of matter. And three, it is immortal. It lives in the body, that is, number one, visible, made of matter, and is mortal. Purush, the consciousness, can be viewed as a singularity. Imagine the filament of a lamp approaching zero dimensions, yet it remains a source of physical light. Purush is a similar point like singularity, but a source of the light of consciousness. It is like a delta function, zero everywhere, but infinitely large at a point. Purush and mind can be viewed as a thumb in a fist. Some children exhibit certain talents not present in their parents. Where did they come from? Purush enters into the father's body, enveloped in a tiny shell of mind made of matter, tiniest subatomic particles. Then it is transported into the mother's body, afterwards taking birth as an individual. Purush mind combined may be understood as thumb in a fist. Thumb represents Purush, and the enveloping fist is its mind. Kat Upanishad 4.13 says, Angusht Matra Purusho Jyoti Eva Adhumaka. Advisory on two common terms, mind and yoga. First of the two slides on mind. The term mind in this presentation is a tiny domain made of tiniest particles. As Purush mind combined enters into father's body, not being discernible. Mind shouldn't be confused with brain, that is a part of the body. Brain's functions will be treated as an independent force that connects Purush mind to the body. So here, mind is something that resides in the brain, but the functions of the brain are not to be seen as the functions of mind. The second of the two slides on yoga. The term yoga will refer to a book in Sanskrit authored by Patanjali thousands of years ago on the science of Purush mind combined, particularly cessation of the mind functions by meditation practices. What the layperson understands by this term is actually Hatha Yoga, therapeutic yoga, so to say. There is absolutely no connection between yoga and Hatha Yoga. Three powers of Purush. Number one, ability to know. Number two, ability to feel experience. and number 3, ability to act. The above powers are exercised through the instruments of mind and body. Purusha as knower, first of the 3 slides, skin or intellect, and 5 inlet ports, sensory organs. Data gathered by 5 sensory organs, called Jnanendriya, organs for knowledge, is displayed on the screen to make intellectual decisions. This is called Chitta as well as Buddhi. An objection can be raised when we are too focused in seeing something, then we miss out the words somebody said to us. Why? Second of the 3 slides, Purush as knower. Linkage to the 5 inlet ports one at a time. We need to have this unit linkage. There is a linkage called manas. Depending on which sensory organ it is connected to, that particular data is brought to the skin or intellect. However, this moment you are seeing me as well as hearing me. This happens because the linkage scans through the 5 inlet ports in rapid succession, almost at the speed of light or even faster, giving an impression that we see and hear simultaneously. But the fact remains that the data is picked up from one port at a time and is brought to the skin, intellect, for the consciousness to view. Yet one more objection can be raised. The data brought to me stays with me. How and where? Where does the memory resides? Purusha has no third of the 3 slides, memory. Memory, called ahankar, copies the incoming data and projects on the screen or intellect to retain the same for future reference. Thus, mind is an aggregate of 3 components: screen or intellect, memory, and linkage. That is called chitta or ahankar, chitta or buddhi. This is called ahankar. This is called manas by Kapil. Purush as experiencer, matter consists of 3 strands. Skin or intellect is made from matter, which in its primordial state is called prakriti, consisting of 3 strands, modes, also called guna, as sattva, rajas, and tamas. They are in equilibrium in the primordial state of matter. This can be loosely translated as like, dislike, and inertia. Our emotions reflect variations of the skin or intellect depending on the proportions of sattva, rajas, and tamas. Their extremes lead us to joy, pain, and sleep, respectively. Thus, skin or intellect gives rise to infinite possible emotions. This is similar to infinite colors that are formed from 3 basic colors: red, blue, and yellow. Just like 3 basic colors, primary colors give rise to infinite colors, the 3 gunas of Prakriti and their different interplay can give rise to infinite emotions of ours. Thus, matter and all its derivatives are transients, constantly changing with time, including our mind, whereas Purush undergoes no variation, being non material. Objects in the universe. 5 gross elements, called Mahabhut or Bhut in short, give rise to all objects in the universe, particularly the coarse objects that are amenable to our sensory organs. Each of these emits a particular kind of data that is captured by our sensory organ. For example, Agni emits roop that is captured by my sight organ called chakshu. In loose terms, fire emits shape and form that is captured by my eyesight. Five gross elements are formed from five nascent elements, corresponding nascent elements called tanmatra, which in turn are made from ahankar, memory. Purusha as doer in action, five motor organs. In an outgoing action, memory, the ahankar, prompts the linkage, which then activates five motor organs called karmendriya, organs for action, not necessarily one at a time. That's why the red arrows are thicker ones, as opposed to the thin arrow which were bringing in the data from the five sensory organs. As such, we can lift an object while walking and speaking. Three activities occurring simultaneously, namely walking, lifting, and speaking. This diagram shows 25 elements of Samkhya, Purush, the non-physical consciousness, plus 24 that are matter and its different derivatives. Number 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we have 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5, 20. So this becomes total 24 variations of matter plus one consciousness that is non-material. That is a very well-known statement of Sankhya 1.61. Sattvajas tamasam samyavastha pakete mahan mahato ahankar, and so on and so forth. To validate, verify the Vedic narrative, one must practice meditation as directed by Kapila in Samkhya and more in detail by Patanjali in Yoga. Yoga 1.2 says, Yoga chitta vetti nirodha. Yoga is cessation of modifications to the skin or chitta to bring it in its raw state. Next, Yoga 1.3 says, Tadadastu swarupe avasthanam. Then the observer, when the cessation of all modifications of mind has occurred, the observer is established in its inherent state, what is called Purush. Then it gets to know its true own self, the Purush self-realization. Is this that simple? Yes and no. Why yes and no? Two contradictory answers. Let's visualize an experiment. When scientist A practices meditation, treating Patanjali's treatise on yoga as the laboratory manual, and his/her Purush mind body combined as the laboratory. The answer yes and no depends who interprets the results. Scenario 1, if scientist A is successful after some years of dedicated and persistent practice, then scientist A is likely to conclude that the answer is yes, Vedic narrative is true. He has gone through the process of self-realization. So he has seen who he is. But in scenario 2, if scientist A's brain and heart functions are monitored by scientist B, then his answer is likely to be no. Because, so if scientist B monitors the scientist A's brain and heart function, the answer is likely to be no. Because Purush mind body and there are other non-voluntary forces as a family called Pran. First of the two slides. Purush mind functions through the body. The entire system, Purush mind body combined, is sustained by the natural forces called Pran, approximately coinciding with our vital non-voluntary forces in nervous, cardiac, respiratory, digestive, and renal systems. Pran is active even in deep dreamless sleep, which is called sushupti, albeit at the bare minimum level. So Pran is always functioning as long as I am alive. Second of the two slides, indeed, even after yoga is achieved by scientist A, his Pran continues to function as it did in deep sleep. Hence, scientist B may conclude that yoga is not much different from deep sleep. However, scientist A, whose answer was yes, he may find the two states very different. In Sushupti, deep dreamless sleep, he has no awareness of his own self, neither of self and nor of Pran. But in the state of yoga that he has achieved after persistent practice in meditation, he has a heightened awareness of self, but none of Pran. That is called self realization. In order to develop a scientific view of ultimate seat of consciousness, first of the two slides, science is a rational relationship between cause and effect that can be verified independently by several scientists performing an experiment in a prescribed manner. Our consciousness is the effect. What is its cause? That is the central question. Second of the two slides, Vedic narrative's answer is Purusha is the cause of consciousness. But Pran must function for Purusha to use its mind and body. Purusha mind combined resides in the body as long as it is inhabitable. When it is no longer inhabitable, that is when Pran ceases to function, then Purusha mind combined departs from the body. So Purusha and Pran, Purusha occupies the body as long as Pran is there. That is coincidental. That's what is stated as death coincides with two events. First is cessation of the vital non-voluntary forces, Pran. That is what is leading to the functions in the brain, cardiac, respiratory systems, etc. All these are non-voluntary but very vital forces. But along with this cessation, death is due to departure of push mind combined from body. That's why death is an irreversible process because push mind combined have left the body for good. Usually, both these events occur simultaneously in most of the natural deaths, except in certain accidental deaths when event number two, departure of push mind combined from body, may follow event number one after a slight delay. And in that delay, if the push can be, if the person could be revived, then he doesn't die, such as in cardiac arrest, etc. The way forward for the scientists. It is not easy to prove the Vedic narrative. We have seen it in the last few slides. But it is far more difficult, almost impossible to disprove it for the simple reason that material things in the universe are void of consciousness. They are infinite things made of matter which do not possess consciousness. That is a very simple basic argument. Indeed, the burden of proof would fall on one who denies the Vedic narrative. Samkhya, authored by Kapila, devotes 90% of the treatise on matter and less than 10% on Purusha, saying that I am quoting Kapil, the author of Samkhya. Even the layperson knows that consciousness is not an attribute of matter. And this is not quite in dispute. It was not in dispute, at least in his time. The dispute is, however, how does this infinite in variations appear in mind, all kinds of our emotions, and joy and pain, and we get tired into sleep? How does all this happen? The answer is mind is made of matter consisting of three strands, namely sattva, rajas, and tamas. Interplay of those three strands give rise to all the infinite variations. And indeed, that is the reason, including those seen in things in the universe. There are infinite things in the universe. How do they get created? Because of the interplay of these three strands. Just like three primary colors give rise to infinite colors. That's what is happening to our mind and to all the objects that we see in the universe. Conclusion. Vedic narrative, Purush is the cause of consciousness. But there is alternative narrative floating around that says brain, heart, respiratory functions, etc., power as a whole, do not give rise to consciousness. That is Vedic narrative is saying. They do not give rise to consciousness, but are coincidental to the presence of Purush. Because Purush is present, they must be functioning. And once they cease to function, Purush will depart. So the cause of consciousness is Purush. Their function is coincidental. That's what is brought out here. The relationship between Purush and consciousness is that of cause and effect, causality. While that between Pran and consciousness is correlative. Both are present if Purush is present. Or if they are functioning, Purush is present. If Pran ceases to function, Purush will no more be there. Purush will depart from the body. Just for fun, I put through some correlations I have seen borrowed from the internet. Let's see, number one, per capita cheese consumption versus number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets. Nice correlation, but anybody can see there is no cause and effect relationship, there is no causality. Same is true, quickly we can see divorce rate in the state of Maine in USA versus per capita consumption of margarine. Age of Miss America versus murders by steam, hot vapors, and hot objects. US crude oil imports from Norway versus drivers killed in collision with railway train. All nice correlations, but there is no causality. That is obvious here. It is urgent. The issue at hand is what is the cause of consciousness? Two possible views. Number one, non physical entity Purush. That's what the Vedic narrative is saying. But at the present times, there is a mainstream scientist thinking that voluntary, non voluntary force, vital non voluntary forces, found, such as those causing all kinds of electrochemical events in my brain, they are the cause of consciousness. But Vedic narrative says they are coincidental, they correlate with our consciousness, but are not the cause of our consciousness. Any delay in resolving the issue by scientists means a heavy cost to the humanity, permitting faith based religions to remain relevant and causing enormous conflicts and wars. Non physical consciousness must come within the scope of science and cannot be left out for religions to speculate. Thank you for your attention.